The European Parliament has voted to declare a climate emergency. Lawmakers hope the move will send a powerful signal to the UN Climate Summit, which starts in Madrid next week. They're also aiming to put pressure on the incoming EU executive to take a leading role in the global fight against climate change. All right, let's get more on this story now. We have our correspondent, Georg Matte, standing by for us in Brussels. Hi, Georg, good to see you. How much support was there for this declaration among lawmakers in Parliament?
To me, a clear majority here amongst MEP lawmakers in Strasbourg backing that largely symbolic resolution. And that was one of the main concerns for some MEPs who have said, you know, it lacks a bit of substance. There was the concern that it could fuel expectations that then could not be met. And that is why the Conservatives, for instance, said, let's rather call it an urgency rather than emergency. Now, the majority of that House has now decided that Europe is the first continent to speak of an emergency in case of the climate.
Well, some are saying that this declaration actually does not go far enough. We spoke to Green Party lawmaker Philippe Lamberts before the vote. Let's listen to what he had to say.
The scientists are basically telling us that we wasted the last decade in terms of climate action, which means that now the measures that we need to take are much more stringent. Is there the political will to do that? It's very nice to have a declaration on the climate emergency, but if actions is not following, this is just hot air. And, well, we have enough of hot air at the moment.
Georg, that is a concern that a lot of climate activists certainly have. I mean, how will this actually be implemented?
That very much now depends on the new European Commission, and the new head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has already announced that she wants Europe to lead that fight against climate change. She wants to make it a top priority of her new Commission to fight climate change, and that is why she has put forward a European green agenda where she wants to make concrete proposals, exactly what Mr. Lamberts here is demanding in order to fight that. Now, I remember very well 2017 when the European Union launched a directive to abolish inefficient vacuum cleaners and in order to save on CO2 emissions. And the result back then was an outcry across Europe where people said, look, this is too much of a bureaucracy, too much interference. So it is difficult. She is in a difficult position making these things from Europe rather than within the nation states of the 28 EU member states. It will be very challenging.
It certainly is now very much on the agenda for the European Union. How do you think climate activists are going to respond to this declaration?
First reactions I have received here in Brussels is that they do welcome the fact that now the European Parliament has acknowledged how urgent the matter is. The House is on fire is what Greenpeace, for instance, said, and they are glad that MEPs have now brought forward that resolution. But they made clear, like Mr. Lamberts has said, look, we need concrete action. We need investment in infrastructure for buses, more trains, rather than cars, which are the greatest emitters of CO2 in the EU. So a lot of actions. If this remains an empty gesture, and that is very much the feeling amongst the climate activists who are expected to be on the streets tomorrow in Brussels again, if this is an empty gesture, it'll do more damage than good.
DW's Georg Matte reporting for us from Brussels. Thank you very much.